Dark Alleys. A Darkbend novel by Frank Fasano. Introduction. What should I be introducing? Should I be introducing you to me? Introducing you to the city? Or should I be introducing you to the night in the City of Darkbend? I am not really sure how this should go because all three play a part in the story. But here goes. I will let you meet the city first and foremost. You will get to know me and the night as the story unfolds. Even in the swelter of summer, the streets of Darkbend at night have a vicious chill to them. It is not the temperature so much. It is more the feeling of being watched in an empty house. The days are not much better, only with the sun shining you can overlook it. In Darkbend at night, even your eyes in a mirror feel alien. Once you cross the bridge, shadows grow just a little darker and stretch a little further. The hairs on the back of your neck feel just a chill from a source that cannot be seen. This is the city. People always say that after a while you don't even notice it. We all know that just isn't the case. You never forget where you are, even if you were born here. Apprehension becomes one's natural state of being. I thought that this would be easier because I am a natural storyteller. It is my business. I guess that it is different now that I am trying to tell the truth. That is not to say that I normally lie. It is fair to say that I am a connoisseur of truths. I prefer to let them age and mature over time like a fine wine, rather than just to use it up all at once. Save it and nurture it and let it grow in value. Darkbend is an open city. The numerous factions that occupy positions of influence like it just that way. Traveling through is tolerated, however the wearing of colors is not appreciated. This in the past has led to some level of opposition. To my knowledge, only one motorcycle club is prohibited from entry. It is best if members of the continue on without getting off of Route 1 or 9. They know who they are, not that they would try wearing their club colors. Most club members would be weary of flying colors here. Or they could be in for a very interesting night. Other than that, bring plenty of cash. Respect the powers that be, not to mention be open to polite suggestions. You should be fine in Darkbend. You should be more than able to find whatever you are looking for. You don't really need to be out of town when the street lights come on. Just always stay where they are bright. Hold your breath as you close your eyes tight if they start to go dark. Because shadows here should be regarded just as the walls. So you should be just as careful not to walk into them. According to the City Visitor Center, the City of Darkbend is a vibrant cosmopolitan area rich in the arts, culture, nature, fine dining, not to mention many trendy bars. We offer full access to the Appalachian Trail, 3 world-class golf courses, 5 centers of live performance including the State Theater, 2 full-time ice skating rinks, 8 bowling alleys, dozens of notable eateries, all within walking distance of a dozen world-class hotels. Centrally located to 3 campuses of State University as well as 4 private colleges. We also have some of the top public schools in the state. We are also the seat of county government with the second highest per capita income in the state. With more bars than you could see in a week of pub crawls. So come for a visit. You may stay for the rest of your life. Chapter 1. Dead Streets. The forlorn nature of this dark tableau was accentuated by the hum of faltering neon lights and punctuated by the clicking staggers of her cheap candy apple red stilettos. She looked back over her shoulder at her latest client, the 5th one of the night. Adjusting the spaghetti strap that had fallen again even after her industrious application of a safety pin to hold her loose tube top up. The strap broken after the rough vigorous fumblings of another client last week. She led the current patron into the darkest recess of the shadows of the alley. Kneeling down before the dark form with a well-practiced smile as she asked mundane questions. So where are you from? What are you in town for? As she reached for the belt before her eyes. I had been hoping to perhaps get a few provocative pictures that would have been appreciated by the more affluent of the participants. Perhaps they may have been willing to purchase purely for their aesthetic and artistic value. offering me fair compensation for my tasteful still life representation of their nocturnal activity. My offer would certainly clearly express the advantage of adding these works of art to their personal collection as opposed to a public showing. Her first 2 questions went unanswered, so she began to ask another. However, no one would ever know what her next question would have been. The murder was as silently unobtrusive as it was viciously dreadful. The killer left the red neon haze of the sign pointing around the corner to the bar. The shadowy form re-enters the gloom that hung as thick as smoke, with me as the newest shadow, giving a wide berth to the blood, the body and the trail of bloody footprints. I bypassed the used needles, discarded vials and detritus of failed hopes and manufactured misery. I am not judging because that is my bread and my butter. I deal in the numerous forms of escape from, let's say, the human condition. Temporary ecstasy and amnestic moments being just some of the items on the menu that my customers are looking for. I am a middleman for the most part, to tell you the truth. If you have a dark desires, I probably know a guy who knows a guy who can help facilitate whatever your kick is. I also deal in information. I was certainly going to make some serious scratch for finding out everything about the killer that I could. The sad specimen of a over 30 looked more like 40 street walking pro who I had just carefully stepped around would be worth more to me dead than she ever would have been to anyone alive. It is a sad state of affairs, to tell you the truth. Once you fall below a certain rung on the socio-economic ladder, that is the sorry state of matters. Once you flip from being a violator of the social good to the category of victim, you will find all your past transgressions and violations of the social contract forgiven. It is fair to say that your sudden restored angelic status increases your net worth to society exponentially. Tammy or Cammy had just been turned from a streetwalker who no one cared about to Saint Camilla, or Tamilla, or whatever her street name was this week. With her new sainthood, no efforts would be spared, and people who would not stop to give her the time of day would now weep over her picture in the newspaper and light candles, bring bundles of flowers, leave letters of sympathy, and even place small stuffed animals of every imaginable color and species. All in a dark alley behind a hole in the wall bar 2 blocks too far from the hospital to be fashionable. I do not know any way to make myself invisible, however I am pretty good at being unnoticed. It is part being uninteresting as well as being uninterested. If you stare at someone, they can feel it. Somewhere between the thalamus and the reptilian brain is somewhere, maybe it's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, I think I read that somewhere. That shit is fascinating. Like if your DPC never learned that you can't do a thing, you could probably still do it. So, when you are following someone, never look directly at them, just look around them, only let your eyes drift over them. Never linger. Keep your feet low to the ground, making your steps in time with them all while observing your environment: damp ground, leaves, mud, water and numerous other surface conditions will change or magnify the sound of your footsteps. The figure before me was starting to move faster, as if something had agitated the post-murder glow, that bliss. I tried to take in as much information that I could as the form passes between shadows. I noted the long loose black hoodie that billowed behind the shape like a cloak. The baggy black pants obscuring the true shape, probably 5'8" or maybe 9 at most. I could see a few shocks of dark hair swing out of the hood when the head would turn to look around. The sharp sound of each step made it easy for me to hide my own footfalls. When the sidewalk became obscured by the shadow of broken streetlights, the person started moving faster. The extended sprint was impressive, if not telling of the nature of the murderer. The killer definitely was an experienced runner with an incredible level of endurance. The enjoyment was passing. The chase was on. As my prey entered Old Town by the park, with its once pristine small 2-story houses all long since converted to multifamily dwellings, the once green lawns either washed away to mud or ripe with weeds and crabgrass, leaving the dividing fences more like concertina wire than what keeps good neighbors. These obstacles proved to be a very small inconvenience, leaping them silently with ease. I started to fall behind trying to, as the shape jumped over the fence that had 3 large dogs that I could see. I stopped chasing, just watching with my mouth agape. I was certainly not going to try that. The animals must have been caught totally off guard. No growling, no barking, they just ran and hid with some faint whimpers. I was not doing to trust my luck, so I cut to my right between two houses coming out across from the park. I cut left running along the broken and crumbling sidewalk as fast as was prudent. Reaching the corner just as the shadow leapt a 6-foot-high wooden fence across the. I only took a second to catch my breath and I took off running again. I was certain that I could at full speed get ahead of my prey in the next long block. I put all I could into it as I sprinted to the next corner. Halfway my blood burned like acid in my veins, leaving my lungs where had shrunk to the size of oranges and my muscles contracted. After forever I hit the pole on the corner. Just as a red Acura NSX pulled away from the sidewalk, taking off with that very distinctive sound of big money. Whoever was driving that car in this neighborhood was up to no good. I just needed to find their vice and either supply it or at least develop a case of financially induced amnesia. I tried to get the license plate number, but there was no conceivable way my target could have made it that fast, gotten into the car and taken off that quickly. So, I waited for my quarry to emerge as I looked around to be sure that they didn't cut through the park. Focusing my attention and all my senses, the sounds of cars in the distance. Televisions near with loud music somewhere in the middle. I was certain that the strobes of red and blue lights were passing on the other side of the park. If they turned right, it could indicate that the body had been discovered. I waited another minute, then lit a cigarette, not really smoking it, just taking a puff every now and then to allay suspicion. Still watching for my prey to emerge. Arriving back to my car just as the yellow police tape was going up half a block away from where I had parked. I was just pulling a U-turn when my path was blocked and a very bright light caught me right in the face, blinding me. I smiled as I squinted up at the man holding the floodlight, then rolling down my window. I asked him, "Is everything okay here, officer?" The cop leaned in my window asking me, "Have you been drinking tonight?" I shook my head saying I'm more sober than most judges. That made him smirk. "So what are you doing out?" I took an unopened pack of cigarettes out of my breast pocket saying, "I just ran to the bodega for some smokes." He ran the beam of his flashlight over me and the inside of my car from top to bottom, then dismissed me. I asked again if everything was okay. He just stopped traffic and waved me into the flow, walking off to speak to other bystanders. So, I drove off in search of the red Acura, listening for the sound of money the entire trip. I am not saying that I drove around all night looking for a single car out of nearly 4 million. I would let my fingers do the walking. I could guesstimate the model and year and knew the make. Not to mention I had a partial plate, it should lead me in the right direction. On the way home I stopped by downtown to see a client. Earning 3 bills in about 5 minutes, that is after I paid an overpriced cover charge to get into the salsa club. So, I hung out working the room, bumping into some old customers and developing a few new ones. I met a few young women who went directly into my personal cell phone and a bunch of others who went into the burner phone I always carried. By midnight I was making out with one of the latter in the back seat of my car in the parking deck. After she said that she had just broken up with her boyfriend, I pulled her panties to the side, got her hot, then we worked the rear suspension of my car for a bit, then went our separate ways. I set my burner to send her a text message in the morning, cut and pasted a number 7. You know number 7. Good morning, insert name here, OMG you're so amazing. I am still breathless from last night. I cannot wait to take you out for dinner with some wine and candlelight. Blah blah blah. No frickin' emojis or any of that LOLLMO a BFF crap if you are going to send a chick who will come in useful soon. Think about it, do you think any little girl ever dreamed of getting a frickin' an emoji from a guy? I personally think not. Real words that make her mind ache for more and her heart race. One of my gifts is finding the potential in anyone. With a little encouragement and support you can make anyone see the potential in themselves. Now once you have helped someone archive a milestone in their life, they will never forget you. With that said, being Prince Charming to a girl on the rebound is a very close second. Listening is a gift and taking mental notes is an indispensable part of my life. I am big on the use of leading questions. What 10 things would turn your frown upside down, or what is your dream, or what is something silly that you still do? The right question can really make a person open up. People say if you can fake sincerity you have it made. Me, I am always sincere. It sometimes feels like I am different people when I am telling the truth. I feel like I am just transformed into the person that they need at that particular moment. There is nothing more exciting to me than a damsel in distress. Only deferring from my previous statement to say that a large prophet. So, Saint whatever her street name is this week is an obvious exception to the damsel in distress rule. A guy has to make a living. My needs for the night satiated as well as my social network extended, I went home for the night. So, I returned to my coffin before the sun could rise, turning my skin to ash. I am just kidding about the coffin. I sleep on silk sheets and a top-of-the-line Posturepedic. As far as me being a bloodsucker, no more than anyone else in today's society. I just found a place in the world where knowing things and people gets me paid. I only make the most of who and what I know. I profit of the fruits of human misery, so what? If I did not make money off of it, it would happen all the same, only I would be broke. I sent 4 emails and 3 more texts to get sent off in the AM, then hit the silk. The AM came and went, getting myself up by the crack of noon. 11:30 actually. I like to sound bright-eyed and bushy-tailed by noon when the Earth's secretaries are making their lunchtime how are you calls. I do not bother with anything as tripe as an alarm clock. For me it is a coffee maker. The soft aroma of my own personal blend of Bones, Atomic and Death Wish coffee to get me started in the nooning. If you feel that coffee would be a better substitute for your blood than lactated ringers in case of massive blood loss, then you absolutely need to try my personal coffee mix. I was showered and shaved and at the car lot 30 minutes later with my 44 once. Ask me if I care. Thermal coffee cup in hand. I had found 4 pre-owned Mercury Grand Marks for a local taxi company that absolutely swore by them. They were going to be picked up today. Can you say chi-ching? Another sale for Trenton King's Fine Autos. We don't sell cars, we sell dreams. On my company crest it says, Hoc vehiculum mos adepto vo concubitus. Roughly translated it means, this car will get you laid. Darkbend is a college town, so what the hell? I thought of that myself. Oh. By the way, I am Trenton King, the owner and proprietor of Trenton King's Fine Auto. Come on by and I will make your dreams come true. There were a few fish already looking at some of the best in our fine selection. You know, just that right balance between muscle and flash. The 68 Camaro, the 2002 Corvette and the custom 2010 Mustang convertible. I knew in a flash that they are punching way above their weight class. I had a 2002 Mustang LX with the Ginger's name all over it. I would let Pablo take the first pass at the Ginger in the Crocs and even take it for a test drive. But I knew I would be closing him in the LX. I yelled at Jelly for a while about looking like a hot mess. Her alluding to the plight of people of color brought a deep growl from the back of the shop. The sound silenced Jelly from her diatribe about the suffering of the African American people instantly. I swear her hair today made her look just like Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons. No wait, not Krusty, the other one. Sideshow Bob. It only made me shake my head in disbelief. I am not just being cruel. She is a mildly attractive woman, however when she did her hair and makeup like a hood rat she came out the other side looking completely hideous. I am not some expert on cosmetology, that is for sure. I am just assuming that there are different types of makeup for any given complexion. I was absolutely certain that Carrie Jelly Donut Norman was not only using the wrong palette for her complexion but also for the wrong tone, race and possibly species. Is there special makeup for mortician? Do they come with a trowel and spade? I told her to stop crying, told her to get Nick on the phone. She asked me if my fingers were broken. I gave her a deadpan expression. After a minute I told her if she needs another week of personal leave, she could start it right now. Unpaid, of course. She pursed her lips so hard that I was surprised her face didn't crack. Then she removed me from her personal reality, picking up the phone and started dialing. I slid a napkin with an extra deep-fried jelly donut on it, sliding it over the receptionist counter to sit in front of her. She rolled her and swung her long, heavily braided hair extensions in a manner that could cause injury to any unsuspecting bystander. Another deep growl came from the repair shop in the rear of the dealership. It was time to feed the beast. I made my way through the shop doors into another universe. It was a place of perfect order where a place for everything and everything in its place. One sign proclaimed. Another one. Keep your dick beaters off my tools. And yet another declared. To avoid serious injury, don't touch my damn tools. The enormous bear of a man stood with his was leaning over a '68 Barracuda, cursing softly to himself while watching me warily. I own the shop, the lot, and the business, still leaving me no misapprehensions about to whom this universe belonged. I walked across the perfectly clean white floor to the orderly desk. I carefully placed a napkin down, then reached into the bag, drawing out one perfect specimen of cruller. I saw the flake of powdered sugar fall to the floor. The large iconic cigar traveled from one side of the dark onyx face to the other. I carefully placed the perfectly prepared delight in the center of the napkin, then retraced my steps to the showroom door and relative safety. As I exited, there came a sound, not quite a grunt, nor was it a word that approximated a thank you. At least it did in the language of whatever hybrid offshoot that could have wiped out Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Homo erectus, and Homo sapien on a very slow Wednesday that worked for me. Mr. Jesse, 6.5 feet tall, with shoulder that could only fit through double doors. I had seen the old man lift a Ford big block V8 without an engine hoist, just his two monstrous hands. I had just crossed out of Mr. Jesse's world when the deep voice resounded twice. I looked back at him. He pointed to the cars in Bay 3 and Bay 5, saying what sounded like doom and doom. I knew that meant that the BMW and the Pontiac were done and done. I nodded, waited to see if there was anything else, only finding myself forgotten. I saw the newspaper on the counter in front of Jelly. The headline was the story of the murder, with a picture that must have been more than a few years old. It was her. Only it was a younger, better groomed her. It was the her before. Men, women, life, chemical dependency, not to mention all the other monkeys on her back, started to beat her up on a daily basis. She seemed to have aged 20 years in the 8 years since the picture was taken. I was sure that the paper could have gotten a more recent photo of her off of whatever site that she sold her wares on. However, this made her look like much more of a victim. Jelly started to comment about the paper, but I interrupted her before I had to think about it. I told Jelly to call the owners and let them know they could pick up their cars anytime. She only said that Nick is still holding on line 3. After shooting her a dirty look, I walked over to the nearest desk, picked up the phone, pressed line 3 to be greeted by a dark, husky voice cursing in a mix of English and Spanish. I cleared my throat only to receive a louder, more particular tirade calling into question my personal lineage, my mother's marital status upon my birth, as well as numerous speculations about my masculine physiology or lack thereof. I looked at the clock. It was 12:20. Then I hung up the phone. I received numerous "no, you didn't" looks. The rest of the Trenton King Fine Auto staff, even Mr. Jesse, was standing at the edge of the known universe, rolling his cigar from side to side. I took my cash out of my pocket, saying who's in, who's in. I walked over to the whiteboard, high/low game. I wrote down 12:20 at the top of the board with 12:35 between two lines. I got $60 on 12:35. Who is in? I placed the money under the red magnet. Pablo and Jelly both put $20 each on before 12:35. After a moment of thought, Mr. Jesse put $20 on after 12:35, grunting only Villy between rolling his cigar, then giving a big white gleaming smile. I could translate Villy into Nick was tracking down a repo in Philadelphia or Philly. Everyone took another donut, drank coffee, and watched the clock. The old man grunted door, meaning the moment that she walked through the door. I had the red countdown, ticking time bomb clock that we used to emphasize the countdown on big sales to show the time remaining. At exactly 12:29, a black Mercury pulled into the parking lot. We watched the clock countdown as the car parked. When both the driver and the rear passenger got out, we knew that it was not Nick. It was just a taxi. The owner of the BMW was there, and the taxi owner was there to check on his order. The new arrivals could see the board standing with my hand over the red button to stop the clock. They both tried to speak, then were hushed. With just 3 minutes on the clock rapidly counting down, they too were caught up in the moment, looking out the window with growing excitement. 2 minutes came and went with my hand poised over that red button. Every car that approached on the busy street was viewed with infinite possibility. 1 minute clicked by with a deep growl in the pit of the stomachs of all who stood around the flashing red numbers with the blinking animated bundle of TNT on the top of it. The cartoon-like fuse grew shorter and shorter. The image of the fuse was going through its final loop when the squealing of tires was just out of sight. I glanced at the clock as 31 became 30, then 29. The red and white '68 Corvette convertible came into the lot on two wheels bouncing, making the hearts of all skip a beat. Swinging my hand to stop the clock only to find it trapped in midair. The old man had my hand wrist and half my arm in his giant-sized mitt. The cigar journeyed from left side to right side of his mouth, only saying door. The car was still rolling when the tall woman clad from head to toe in dark black leather jumped out and ran into the shop. As she entered the door, my hand was free, completing the motion, stopping the clock. The image showed no fuse left, leading to the LCD package of explosives. The clock read very clearly 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds left on the bet. Only I was very glad that I had purchased a countdown clock that had decisecond counter on it. It clearly showed 0.64 decisecond left on the clock. In a very mature self-restraint, I took the money off the board, folded it in my roll, then placed it in my pocket. Only then did I start planting my cabbage patch. Jumping into my Running Man. The Tootsie Roll came next, as I needed to share the love straight into the butterfly. I was just dropping the nay when a deep growl brought me up short. Mr. Jesse was giving me a look that could not only freeze water but also make it reconsider all its past transgressions and just evaporate. I looked up into those eyes with only a shrug. I could see him holding Nick back with a single raised finger. I saw one of his ginormous meat hooks inches from my face, and I waited for the inevitable. The fingers the size of Polish sausage in a tight fist started to unroll slowly. This must have been how the beginning of the universe must have looked. I could hear. Also sprach Zarathustra. By Richard Strauss, like in the beginning of that movie 2001, only when his hand was totally open there was a crisp new $20 bill. When I took the bill there was only a low growl then. The old man returned to his personal universe of total order and control, leaving me with Nick's eyes burning with anger, looking directly at me. I looked around the showroom, finding it strangely empty. I walked to my desk, sat down behind it, throwing my feet up on it. Nick came around behind the redwood, removing the only barrier between us. Knocked my feet off and squeezed in between, sitting her tight leather pants right in the center of my far side blotter. Her perfect smile held no mirth, only a Damoclesic doom. Her voice came out like the deep growl of a jungle cat. I know that there must have been a catastrophic breakdown in the cellular network, because if not, that would leave the only other possibility to be that you hung up on me. I know that I told you that I do not appreciate being hung up on. I made it very clear what would happen to you if you ever hung up on me again. I gave her my best disarming smile as she placed her foot directly between my legs. Nick. Nicky. My little Nikiti, what can I say? I just really wanted to see you. The black stiletto slipped closer to punctuating her point. I see you got the vet back, smiling. Very nice work. All she said was dogs. He stashed the vet in a yard in Philly with dogs. You really should have included that in the information that you provided me. You know how I feel about dogs. The word came out with extra emphasis. Nikita, if I did not know that he had the car out in Philly, how could I know about the dogs? I knew that she really didn't like dogs. If I had any idea about the animals, I would have told her. She was not having it. $2,000, she said without hesitation. I shook my head. 1,200, I said as the heel slid closer. I reached into my pocket, took out my money, counting off 12 crisp Benjamins. The heel slipped, giving a rough nudge to my groin hard. I shook my head, saying, you can drop kick my man parts all frickin' day. But a deal is a deal. Our eyes were locked in a tense silence as glaciers expanded across the tundra, then retreated, moving boulders and altering the contours of the earth, then doing it again. The entire time our eyes locked, neither of us even blinking. I was awaiting the appearance of the great mammoths when she finally sighed, nudging my groin once more playfully, then taking the money out of my hand. I said, a deal is a deal, She nodded in agreement, then I took another $100 off my roll, handing it to her, saying, "For the dogs." She smiled, taking it, folding it with the others, then stuffing it all into her bra in a slow and deliberate motion. Nikita and I have a complicated relationship rife with conflict. Both of us. Rich with lurid interludes of passion. Me to her. Punctuated with violence. Her to me. She has a very healthy sex drive, so she calls me whenever she, let's say, has an itch that needs to be scratched, giving me 10 minutes to make sure that there is nothing in my immediate area that she would find objectionable. Examples being dirty laundry on the floor, unwashed dishes in the sink, half-eaten pizza on the table in the living, that ring around the inside of the toilet in the bathroom, or especially a naked woman in my futon in my bedroom. The last is a deal breaker. The last time it happened, it was a nose breaker as well. I am not always at home when she calls that she wants me to, as aforementioned, scratch her itch. Regardless of where I am, she always seems to know just where I am. She always finds me within that prescribed 10 minutes. This is Nikita's idea of a mature relationship, her way or the highway, as she says. I will tell you that I have broken her rules more time than I can count. I have also learned to set my own nose. The line at the ERs are just way too long, and they don't have any sort of preferred membership of frequent flyer program. They really should, especially in Darkbend. As the tension in the room subsided, the people gradually returned. Cowards! I chastised the room in general. The professor paid for the work on his classic BMW. Lenny from the taxi company paid for his pre-owned Mercury Grand Marquis, and Pablo locked the vet that Nicky had just repoed in the yard until the would-be owner either made good on his past due bill plus my usual agita/aggravation fee, or relinquished ownership, so I could sell it again. You would be amazed how many times we can sell a single car. It would amaze you. It is by no means just me. The used car racket is all about the benefits of self-financing. You may know that there are legal limits on the interest rates that can be charged, like 18% to 20%. However, there is absolutely no limit. Most states do not limit the amount that you can charge on late payments or extra fees. Now, I am not one for all that fine print bull. I charge a fair interest rate on very standard type loans. I know people have problems, and that life happens. Just to rule the first is, don't turn up with nothing. If you turn up and show me you're trying, I will work with you. The second is, never don't show up. If you do that, I will find you, and I will have more for you than some harsh words. Remember, if you play stupid games, you will win stupid prizes. I'm pretty sure that if the current owner of that vet has anything to say to Nicky other than some sincere apologies, she will give him some seriously stupid prize. He should not have tried to use the dogs to keep her out. That was a very bad idea. I had a few text messages to answer, and the guy who runs plates for me called back with 18 possibles on the info I had. After we ruled out the make, class, and year, we narrowed it down to 6. After he started reading off the names and addresses on the owners, my blood ran cold at number 3. Once he read out the address of the Brody house, I guessed the name. I hoped that I was wrong for so many reasons. Jezebel. She was the manager of the Brody house. A place that is so protected that Mr. Barron and Mr. Duke would not even go there without a formal invitation. It is one of the oldest buildings in the city, still somehow falls outside the city limits on the current incorporation of our fair municipality, even though it was on the original 1666 incorporation documents. It was turned over to the National Park Foundation in 1921 for the creation of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, generally known as the Appalachian Trail. One of the most beautiful walking trails in the world, and the longest, so they say, winding nearly 2,200 miles through 14 states. Starting in Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and ending in Maine. It is not a big surprise that the more than a quarter of the disappearances, animal attacks, horrible accidents, and gruesome murders happen on the little 30-mile stretch that winds its way through Darkbend. Dead center in the middle of our little stretch of that 2,200 mile is the Brody house. I may walk the darkest alleys of the city during the darkest night, however I try to only go to the Brody house during the day. I open the drop safe in my office, taking out my Walter M2, then clipping it on my belt behind my back under my jacket. Even with my little friend I was reluctant to go alone. I looked at my options. I could bring Donut and hopefully leave her there, just kidding, kind of. I could bring Pablo. I know he stands all of 5'3", but he is a scrapper. He just didn't cover much in the intimidation side of things. Then there was Mr. Jesse. He had a whole hell of a lot of intimidation. Just getting him to do anything other than what he defined as his job is, let's just say, problematic. It could be as simple as asking him for a favor. The only thing is, favors always seem to bite you in the pants. It seemed to be doubly true here. I had an idea. I could just be straight with him and offer him extra cash for his time. Honesty was such a novel approach that I had never even thought of trying it. I walked over to the door to the shop. His eyes were on me before I even entered. I took a breath, then said, Mr. Jesse, I will give you $20 to take a ride with me to the Brody house. The cigar moved from right to left then back again. He only said $100 with perfect diction. I was so shocked that I almost agreed without hesitation. That would set a terrible precedent, so I countered-offered $50. He said $100, and if you try to negotiate again it will double. I pretended to wrestle with the dilemma, then I acted as if I had just given in. I took $50 out of my roll as he walked over to me. I said, $50 now and $50 when we get back. He took the $50 out of my hands, then placed his enormous hand on my shoulder, taking my roll out of my other hand. He said, no, $100 now, if you don't mind, again with that disturbingly Eastern educated articulation. He placed my cash back in my breast pocket. When his hand that was resting on my shoulder lifted, I could feel the absence. Then again when he patted me on the shoulder, I could imagine what a railroad spike must have felt like when it was hammered into rock. He turned away, saying, just give me a moment to wash up and change. I stood at the doorway waiting for him to return, not wanting to disturb anything in the old man's shop. I thought that heard a low growl when I looked at one of his tools. I may have just been imagining it. 10 minutes later Mr. Jesse appeared wearing a perfectly tailored gray three-piece suite with red and blue treads subtly interspersed every inch. I nodded approvingly, saying, Brooks Brothers. He checked his cufflinks, nodding, saying, only timeless. We climbed into his shining old black pickup truck. The perfect vehicle seemed to defy time with a classic look, deep black paint that looked glossy as it seemed to absorb the light that fell on its massive round fenders. The interior was completely the opposite, seeming to that of a brand new vehicle with modern amenities. Like the suite, the truck seemed to fit him perfectly. Of course his shoulders were halfway over into the passenger side, but still comfortable. My head was just at eye level with his right shoulder. I was not surprised that he started turning towards our destination without soliciting my directions. For all I knew, Mr. Jesse could have grown up in the city. He may even know the dark alleys better than I do. It was 45 minutes later according to his clock when past the far gate of the country club, then a half mile, and we pulled up to the perfectly manicured drive with the White House just a white blur in the distance. The gravel crunched under the tires of the truck at a comfortable speed. Mr. Jesse approached without concern, touching his eyes yet still respectfully. I would have said the man only had one emotion in the 5 years he had worked for me, that was a general state of gruff annoyance. Today was a day of firsts for him. The expression on his face was that of a seasoned boxer circling in on a very worthy challenger. There were a few expensive cars leaving as we approached the house. The first two passed and Mr. Jesse gave them plenty of room. He was a very considerate driver until the third car, an Italian racer, came speeding straight the center line, flashing its lights and chirping its high-pitched horn. I could see the large man's lip go up in a smirk as the cigar rolled from the left side of his mouth to the right. The old man just stayed on his side of the line, going the same speed. The sound of the black sports car's engine whined to a higher gear, sending a spray of gravel out behind it. Jesse just stayed his course as the car headed for us like a missile. The distance between the two vehicles was halved, with the small car's headlights blinking like strobes accompanied by its horn at a continuous blare. A second later the distance was halved again, leaving 30 feet from bumper to bumper. The small black sports car overcompensated for the collision, swinging off the gravel and spinning out on the perfect grass, leaving a couple 100 feet of dirt torn up. The cigar took a return trip, reinforcing Mr. Jesse's smile. It was obvious that the incident only helped the driver to relay, leaving me with a matching grin. He drove past the valet to park his truck on his own. The sound of the sports car pulling in right behind us tearing up move gravel as it slid to a stop. The driver's door to the car opened straight up like a bat wing and the driver jumped out. He ran to Mr. Jesse's door and opened it with a look that gave him a moment to consider. The stream of curses that had been flowing from the tall, well-dressed man's mouth stopped. I jumped out of the cab of the truck running around the large vehicle before the old man could even get out. I watched as the would-be assailant stepped back as the enormous black man exited the truck. The man who had been yelling stood a solid 6'2". He was looking up at Mr. Jesse as he unfolded from the driver's side. He was looking up, and you get the picture. The man started to point, then reconsidered the action, saying finally, "Who the hell are you?" The old man only let out a low growl that sent the other man stepping backwards. He tripped seemingly over his own feet, scuttling clear of the large black man who could seemingly crush him with just his gaze. The valet came over, helping the man to his feet, saying, "Mr. Odium, are you okay, and let me help you, sir?" I could see the smile on Mr. Jesse's face grow, as Mr. Odium approached again, with the three valet giving more courage than a stiff shot of whiskey. He instructed the newcomers to identify us with all haste. They approached us like they were walking in a minefield. As one of the young Hispanic kids said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, can you please tell us who you are and what you are doing here?" Another low growl and a sudden movement made the three freeze 10 feet from us. They watched as the old man reached into his pocket, bringing out only a cell phone. There was another growl that I could feel like a vibration in my feet. Then came the perfect diction from the old man. "So you are Mr. Robert Odium III, I will assume." This gave the angry man even a bit more courage, standing a bit straighter even if he was still behind the three young men in red sweet coats. He said, "That is correct, I am Robert Odium, and now I would like to know exactly who you men are." The pause in the sentence was very revealing as to what this man must have thought of us. I was just leaning casually on the front bumper of the truck wearing my best suite and a shit-eating grin as the four men stood in the shadow cast by Mr. Jesse. The old man held up one finger at an approaching valet, freezing him. He touched the screen of his cell phone a few times and the phone started ringing. Mr. Odium said, "Oh yes, I hope you are calling the police." The phone rang only twice before it was answered. The brisk professional voice answering said, "Hello." The old man said in his perfect diction, "Hello sir, this is Mr. Jesse Lane. I hope I am not interrupting you, Mr. Odium?" The Mr. Odium who was standing behind the valets was objecting when the voice over the phone came out sounding warm and friendly. "Mr. Lane, it is very nice to hear from you. What can I do for you?" The old man smiled. The valets and I were totally confused, however the color just drained from the face of the Mr. Odium who was standing with us. "You are on speakerphone. I am here with your son, my employer, and three young gentlemen in the employ of the Brody House, and it seemed that your son and I have had a mild motor vehicular incident. He seems to be very upset over the episode. Given our past history, I thought it would be best if I spoke to you directly before it went any further." I was trying not to laugh. My mechanic had the current owner, President and Chief Executive Officer of Odium Global Pharmaceutical on his speed dial. We nearly had the heir apparent all over the old man's windshield like a bug. The heir was trying to speak up but was cut off by the voice over the phone. "Robert, please see me at your earliest convenience when you return to the office." The heir looked dejected, answering only, "Yes, father." The voice spoke again, saying, "Mr. Lane, if there are any damages." The phone was taken off speaker and a brief conversation between the mechanic and the CEO was held in hushed tones. Mr. Odium the younger returned to his car, driving off at a more respectable speed. The valets drifted away, and Mr. Jesse and I walked to the steps leading to the portico that draped around the entire first floor of the Brody house. I gave the building one last apprising glance. The majestic structure seemed to defy estimation on the number of floors that the structure actually possessed. The main house had 4 of 5, depending if the smaller row of windows were a floor or if the balcony and the widow's walk on the roof was another level of the structure. Then a brief examination of the numerous tower spire steeple leaves the count in more confusion. An examination of one minaret seemed to indicate 8 different floors. If counting the structure above ground was difficult, the rumors about how far the structure went into the earth was just confounding. People say that far below the basement was an oubliette that reaches deep into the earth. It was not a place that I wished to see. I may be going to hell soon enough. I really don't need tour beforehand. Vertigo overtook me like I was on the roof looking down rather than standing on the ground looking up. The feeling gripped me deep down low and I could feel the dizziness was sinking into my feet while at the same time I felt bile rising.